Om Sadashiva Samarambham
Shiva
Shankaracharya Madhyamam
Asmadacharya
Asmadacharya Paryantam
Guru Parampara
Om Sahana
Om
Bhavatu Sahana
Savavatu
Bhunaktu Sahaviryam
Sahaviryam
Karvavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma
Praditamas
Vidvishavahai Om Shanti Shanti
Shanta Shanti.
Shanti. So we were on the fourth mantra of the Kenopanishad, second chapter. So we will chant that again. Pratibodha vidhitam matam amritatvam hi vindate
Amritatvam hi vindate
atmana vindate viryam
Atmana vindate
vidyaya vindate amritam.
Vidyaya
So we'd had a very extensive discussion on the first pada, the first quarter of this mantra, Pratibodha Viditam Matam. And to briefly recapture, to briefly summarize what we have done so far, we said that this Brahman is the content of every thought. Pratibodha Viditam Matam. And why is that so? Because we know that thoughts are produced in the mind. The mind is anatma. Anatma is inert, jada. But because it is the thought which gives knowledge, how can a inert vastu give knowledge? How can an inert thought give knowledge? That is because the thought is pervaded by Brahman and therefore making it conscious, as if conscious, which is what we call reflected consciousness. The thought is the reflecting medium. The consciousness, Brahman, pervades every thought and it becomes the RC, the reflected consciousness. And therefore, in every single thought, Brahman, the OC, is prevalent. And therefore, the first quarter of this mantra is saying that that is the right way to understand. You don't need to look for Brahman anywhere else. Every thought that you have, the content of that thought is Brahman itself. Right? And so Shankara says in his commentary that Brahman has to be known in this manner only. And when I see that RC as myself, the Jivatma RC as myself, if I recognize, then that means that I am taking the limitations of the thought, of the reflecting medium, and superimposing them upon myself. So if Brahman is seen, or if you are seeing yourself as factually limited, what you have done is you have superimposed the limitation of the reflecting medium upon yourself, Brahman. So that is not the correct way of looking at you. That is, you are understanding yourself as RC, reflected consciousness. But if you know that you are actually that Brahman which is pervading every thought, then you understand that the limitations of the reflecting medium seemingly limit you. And therefore, you see yourself as seemingly limited, not factually limited. Seemingly limited because of the limitations of the reflecting medium. Then that is the correct understanding. And so we have to revise our understanding of ourselves. Remember that the catch in this whole story is that to revise your understanding, to have an understanding, you have to be the RC, because OC does not have a mind. Only the RC has the reflecting medium, the mind. And therefore, in any understanding or revision of understandings, you are remaining as the RC. Therefore, standing as the RC, I have to learn to understand that the limitations of the RM are seeming limitations. They don't limit me, the OC. Therefore, if I understand myself as factually limited by the limitations of the RM, I am Chidabhasa, the RC. When I replace the word factually with apparently or seemingly, then the seemingly limited seemingly limited means what? Not actually limited. It is only apparently limited. So that apparently limited I am the OC, the Chit itself. So the difference between understanding myself as Chit and Chidabhasa is that if I think I am actually limited by the limitations of the RM, then I am Chidabhasa. When I understand that the limitations belong to the RM and not to me, then I am the OC. At that point of time, I have claimed myself as Chit, Chit and Sat, the witness of all thoughts. And once I am the witness of all thoughts, it means what? The thoughts come and the thoughts go in me. Therefore, I am free from the arrival and departure of anything. I am also, if you can replace the thought with the word body, then I am free from the arrival and departure of the various bodies, because the bodies come and the bodies go. Similarly, when the mind comes and the mind goes, I seem to arrive and I seem to depart. But when I know that mind comes and goes in me, then I am free from the coming and going of the mind. Then I become the observer, the Atma Swarupam, right? And as observer, as the Atma Swarupam, I am free from any defects at all. That's a very important point, which Shankara makes in his commentary. He says that remember that once you have claimed yourself as Brahman, as Atman, you have no connection with the mind. All the defects in the mind, kama, krodha, lobha, etc., they belong to the mind, they belong to the anatma, the reflecting medium. The reflecting medium they belong to, they seem to contaminate you, but they are not contaminating you. And therefore, you don't require any sadhana chatushtayam at all. As Brahman, there is no question of doing any sadhana to improve yourself, because Brahman cannot be improved. It is only the mind which requires sadhana chatushtayam. I am always free as Brahman. But remember that where there are problems in the mind, limitations of the mind, they can affect my enjoyment of life. And therefore, you can improve your mind doing all sort of sadhanas, right? Viveka, Vairagya, everything can be done to improve your mind. It is not relevant to your status as Nitya Mukta Brahman. Any sadhana is never relevant for the purpose of moksha, because as Brahman, you are always free. But you can improve the mind so that life is made more enjoyable. So this is one important idea. You can be free, you are always free, but you may not enjoy the consequences, the results of jnanam because of problems in the mind. And therefore, if you want to enjoy the jnana phalam, then you require sadhana chatushtayam, which is improvement of the mind. Right? Therefore, I should never understand consciousness as located in the mind. Because the moment I say that I, Brahman, am located in my mind, then the reflected consciousness becomes limited by that mind. So I have to replace certain words in my understanding. I will say that I, Brahman, am not located in the mind, but I, Brahman, am reflected or manifested by the mind. The manifested consciousness, the reflected consciousness, is still original consciousness and therefore unlimited by the mind. But whatever limitations appear to be, they are only appearances, they are only seemingly limitations. And that is why I said that whenever I say that I, Brahman, am subject to arrival and departure, it is because I have taken the mind as real, as Satyam, and therefore for me, reflected consciousness becomes real, and therefore I am subject to arrival and departure. But when I know that mind is mithya, RM will come and go. And with the RM coming and going, the consciousness seemingly arrives and goes. When I understand that, it is OC. It is like the light of the sun traveling in the mirror. It appears to come and go with the mirror, but really speaking, the sun doesn't go anywhere. So when I understand consciousness in the mind as the knower of everything, but changing along with the mind. So a changing consciousness, the changing depending upon the mind itself, upon the RM itself, the changing consciousness is RC. If I think that I am a changing knower, I am the RC. But when I know that I am the OC, the changeless knower of everything, then I have understood myself as the OC. And so Shankara says this particular understanding that any individuality, it belongs only to the mind and the bodies, right? And Atma is nirvisheshaha, without any individuality at all. Only when I can understand that I am that Atma, which is not having any individuality at all, then only I can understand the oneness of consciousness, the Sarvatma Bhava, which we call, that in all individuals, I alone am evident. To become the all, I have to drop the one. I cannot be an individual at the same time be Sarvam also, right? So Shankara says that this oneness becomes evident only when one transcends that individuality. And therefore, once having transcended the individuality, I understand that there is no difference in the consciousness obtaining in different jivas. The containers, the body minds are different, but the content is I alone. And this has to be extended even to Ishvara. Between me and Ishvara, in the content, I am saying in the content, which is the consciousness, there is no difference. But in the container, my mind is vastly inferior to Ishvara's mind. So Ishvara's mind and my mind, Jiva's mind, you cannot compare. One is infinite, one is very much finite. But the content of both, Ishvara's my infinite mind and my finite mind, the content of both is consciousness alone. And Shankara gives an example. This is like the space which is in a mountain or in a pot or in a cave or in a glass. You cannot count them as different spaces. Only the containers are different. The walls of any container do not affect the space. They don't divide the space at all. And so as long as mentally I divide consciousness into RC and OC, in other words, as long as I say that Jivatma consciousness is there and Paramatma consciousness is there, I have not understood properly. I will continue to be a samsari because Jivatma consciousness being differentiated from Paramatma consciousness, Jivatma consciousness will be finite, and anything finite is always subject to change, always will have problems. It is only when I understand that I am that Paramatma consciousness, that limitless consciousness, that I, the Jivatma consciousness, the content of the Jivatma mind, am not different from the content of the Paramatma mind, then I have understood that I am that Brahman without any limitations. My understanding is in the Vyavaharika plane, in the transactional plane, transactional universe, I function as reflected consciousness as the Jivatma. I function as reflected consciousness, Jivatma. I am not the Jivatma. I function, meaning what? I am subject to the seeming limitations of the body and the mind. But really speaking, at the Paramarthika level, at the absolute level, I am the limitless Brahman only. It is that limitless I who am functioning in the transactional universe. For the function, I need the medium of functioning, which is the body and the mind. Body and the mind have limitations, but I have to view them as seeming limitations. Then only I am claiming myself as OC. And Shankara quotes from Brihadaranyaka Upanishad in support of this particular definition. He says, Drishte Drishta Shrute Shruta Mater Manta Vijñater Vijñata. This is from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Drishte Drishtaha. So he says, this Brahman is the seer of all that is seen. Shrute Shrutaha is the hearer of all that is heard. Mater Mantaha is the mind of all that is known by the mind. Vijñater Vijñata, it is the knower of the knower himself. Right? So in every knowledge, in every thought, this Brahman is there. The bottom line is that one need not do any sadhana for Brahma Anubhava, for experience of Brahman, because every thought that I have, every experience that I have is nothing but Brahman alone, because Brahman is the very content of that thought. Pratibodhitam viditam matam. Therefore, any sadhana I need to do is always for what? For improving the mind, so that the jnana phalam, the results of this jnanam, are enjoyed by me. Very important idea over here. Therefore, before study of Vedanta, we think that meditation will give jnanam, but after study of Vedanta, we know that meditation is not for any jnanam, is not for any experience. It is for the experience of the jnana phalam. It is for improving the mind so that I can experience the benefits of jnanam. I am not experiencing the benefits of jnanam. There are two reasons. One is I don't have the jnanam, in which case I have to work for jnanam first. But once jnanam is there, which means I know I am Brahman, and I'm still not getting the benefits, then I should understand that I need to work on the mind. That is what is meant by Pratibodha Viditam Matam, the first quarter. Okay. Now, let us look at the second quarter. Amritatvam hivindate. So what is this knowledge? Pratibodha viditam matam. Brahman is the very content of every thought. And therefore, I need not look for Brahman anywhere else. I need not do any sadhana for Brahman, because I am Brahman myself. What is the advantage? Amritatvam vindate. Vindate means labhate. Labhate means attain. Amritatvam is mortality, immortality. And Shankara defines it as mokshaha. So Amritatam is equal to mokshaha. So he says, by this particular knowledge that I am Brahman, you get moksha, you attain moksha. And what again we need to stress on, what is this Brahman Jnanam? What is this Pratibodhita Matam? Because it is the most important idea in all of the Vedantic literature. So this Brahma Jnanam is what? It is that non-changing consciousness which pervades every changing thought. Right? Every thought depends. You have a glass thought, you have a mobile thought, you have a flower thought, you have another person thought. Thoughts change because thoughts are recognizing objects. Padas are recognizing padarthas. Thoughts are recognizing objects. Objects change, thoughts change. But that non-changing consciousness which pervades all thoughts, that is Brahman. That idea is Brahmagyanam. And even then, if I know that my every thought is pervaded by Brahman, that is only 50% of the knowledge. What is the other 50% of the knowledge? Is it sufficient to know? Pratibodhitam matam. Every thought is pervaded by Brahman. Is that sufficient? Or is something more required?
No, Raviji.
Yes, Natarajanji.
I have to know that I am that. I am the OC.
Exactly. The first idea is to know that Brahman pervades every single thought. And second idea is to know that that Brahman is no one else but me. And we often say abiding in Brahmagyanam or abiding in Brahman, right? So this Shankara explains that over here. He says Swatmani avasthanam. Abiding in that Brahman, it is nothing but being constantly aware of the fact that that unchanging Brahman of every thought, that unchanging Brahman prevalent in every thought, that unchanging Brahman I am. Abiding in Brahman is taken as moksha. You have to understand that when you constantly remember that Brahman present in every experience, every thought, that Brahman is you, that alone is immortality. Right? And once you know that in changing thoughts, in changing experiences, that Brahman which is there, I am, you have stopped looking upon yourself as a jiva. Correct? I am Brahman. Because everywhere, every thought, every experience, I go beyond the anatma. I look at the all-pervading substratum, the adhishthanam, the Brahman itself. And I say, in every experience that I have, this Brahman I have. And when you have got that consistently in your mind, you are no longer a jiva. You have stopped looking upon yourself as a jiva. You are looking upon yourself as Brahman. And Shankara asks a very nice question here. When you have started looking upon yourself as Brahman, what is the relevance of Jivan Mukti for you? Because up till now we have said all sadhana is for Jivan Mukti. Right? Shankara says, what is the relevance here for Jivan Mukti for a person who has claimed himself as Brahman? Jivan Mukti is not for Brahman. Jivan Mukti is for the Jiva. And therefore we say that once a Jiva gets Jivan Mukti, when he drops the body, he gets Videha Mukti. So for a person who has understood that I am Brahman pervading every thought, every experience, there is no concept of Jivan Mukti or Videha Mukti. This is what makes this particular mantra so beautiful. It says there is only one real Mukti, and that is Nitya Mukti. You are permanently free. You have been free. You are free. You will always be free. Don't work for Jivan Mukti itself. There's no point. Then what is Jivan Mukti? Jivan Mukti then is the working on the mind so that you enjoy the jnana phalam. You enjoy the benefits of that knowledge that I am Brahman. Because the mind can never be 100% pure, 100% clean. Sadhana Chatushtayam is always possible for a mind right up to the time of the death of the mind, of the death of the body. Therefore, Sadhana Chatushtayam is a permanent feature. You can keep on improving the mind so that your experience, your enjoyment of life becomes more and more. Jnana phalam enjoyment is more and more. But you have to remember, whatever sadhana we are doing for the mind, it is for the mind alone. It is for enjoyment of jnana phalam, not for mukti. That sadhana for enjoyment of jnana phalam is called jivan mukti. But you are nitya mukta. And this is what has been said. And therefore Shankara says that this knowledge of Brahman where he defines again this knowledge of Brahman is the knowledge that Brahman is available in every thought and experience. And then he says that this Brahma Jnanam can be really called Brahma Jnanam only when the content is I am the consciousness obtaining in every experience. Content being that I am Brahman, which is pervading every experience. I am available in every experience. And that is a Pratibodhitam Matam. Okay. So one need not go to Samadhi. One need not have any special experience because that Brahman is available all the time in every experience and every thought. And therefore, Shankara says, Atma Jnanam, which is what we all try to obtain. Atma Jnanam can be called Atma Jnanam only when you know. Remember that Atma means I, right? So the knowledge, my knowledge of myself can be said to be real, can be said to be the truth. Atma Jnanam can be said to be truth only when the very content of the Atma Jnanam is what? Brahma Jnanam. And what is the Brahma Jnanam? That I am Brahman. I am that Brahman which is available in every thought. Why does Shankara say that the Brahma Jnanam has to be the content of Atma Jnanam? Because Brahma Jnanam is what? That Brahman is immortal. Atma Jnanam has to contain the information that immortal Brahman I am. Because only saying that Brahman is immortal doesn't give moksha. You can say Brahman is immortal, but unless you say that Brahman is I, then you are still a mortal. And therefore, Brahman should never be known as an object, because Brahman as an object is Anatma. Anatma is different from you who are the Atma. And the Anatma status of Brahman, even if it is immortal, cannot be the Karanam, cannot be the cause for my immortality. And therefore, I, Brahman, I knowing that I am this Brahman is Atmajnanam, is the content of my Atmajnanam. Atmajnanam must consist of the thought, I am that Brahman which is pervading in every experience. Once that is there, then I can claim that Brahman's immortality as myself. And this immortality, again he says a very beautiful line, Atmanaha Amritatvam. He says this immortality of Atma is unconditional because of the very nature of Atma. What is the nature of Atma? You are saying that Atma is Brahman. Okay. And therefore, there is no conditionality about that immortality. Right? Now, thing here is something which you already answered. It's a question which can come up. If immortality is my nature is internal to me. It's available all the time. It can never be treated as an objective, right? As something to be obtained. And therefore, why should you do any sadhana? And if there is no sadhana, then why is studying Vedanta important? The answer is what we've already seen. Even though immortality is my nature and therefore not a goal at all, not a destination at all, but because of the lack of knowledge that I am Brahman, it can become a seeming goal. If I think I am mortal, then to achieve immortality can be a seeming goal for me. And therefore, it's a seeming objective, a seeming sadhyam. You can think of it like, you have put your specs on your forehead and you're looking for it. The spectacle are a destination. You're looking for the spectacles, but they really are not. They're already there on your head. Then why are you looking? Because you do not know that it is on your forehead. It's a seeming objective. Similarly, this immortality which you're looking for, which you really already are, it is a seeming objective. It's not a real objective. And that is why we say that it is always through jnanam alone that you get moksha because you are already free. Jnanam just removes the idea that you are not free. Just like your search for the spectacles removes the idea the spectacles are not on your forehead. Okay, so that very long thing finishes off the commentary on the second quarter. Now we will look at the third quarter. Third quarter says, Atmana vindate viryam. Right. Literal translation is, from this Atma, Atmana vindate, you will obtain viryam, strength. For what purpose? Strength is required to overcome samsara. So from Atma alone, you will get the strength to overcome samsara. Okay, so one person who objects, Purva Pakshi, he stands up and says, fine, how does this sadhaka, how does this seeker get the strength to conquer death? By what method is this immortality obtained? And the reason he says that if the strength is there in your own nature, right, Atmana, and this, therefore the word Atmana has to be taken as my own nature. From that own nature, I will get the strength to destroy samsara. Now, just to introduce a side subject, there are other commentators who take Atmana here as sadhana chatushtaya sampanna manaha. Atmana, they say, is a mind which has been purified through sadhana chatushtayam. There are some commentators, one called Amara Dasa, but that is not the meaning taken by Shankara. So we'll take the meaning of Shankara's meaning only, where he takes Atmana as your own nature, not as the mind. Okay, and Shankara is saying that if you ignore the strength of the Atma and try to get the support, the strength from some external source, even the mind, right? If you try to get the strength from the mind, he says the mind is anatma, right? And he says even if you try to get the strength from Ishvara, Ishvara is what? This Ishvara can be two. One Ishvara can be I myself. One Ishvara can be Saguna Ishvara whom I worship. If I try to get the strength from Saguna Ishvara, Shankara reminds us, Saguna Ishvara different from you is nothing but Anatma. Because the word Atma means I. So when I accept that Saguna, the Ishvara is me, that is not Saguna Ishvara, that is Nirguna Ishvara, right? Because the bodies are different. When I accept that Ishvara is me, then I can derive strength from Atma. Because Atma itself means me. But if I am worshipping Saguna Ishvara and asking for strength, that Saguna Ishvara is not Atma, it is Anatma only. And how can any strength derived from Anatma destroy death? Because Anatma is within the fold of death only. And he gives a few examples. He says, strength derived from money, from mantras, from herbs, from tapa, from meditation, they can never destroy samsara because they are all anitya vastu. All these are finite, limited entities. You can include Ishvara also here. Money, mantra, herbs, yoga, meditation. Ishvara also you can include. Because this is all anatma, all limited entities. And he says limited entities can never give you the infinite strength needed to overcome the infinite death. And therefore, it is only the strength which is derived from Atma Jnanam which is able to overpower death. Right? Now, one question can come up. Here he says, strength derived from Atma Jnanam can overcome samsara. Somebody can stand up and say, but Atma Jnanam is what? Atma Anatma. Atma Jnanam is Atma Jnanam, very much Anatma, because it is there in your mind. then how can Atma Jnanam conquer death? So the answer is what? The strength of Atma Jnanam doesn't come from Atma Jnanam. The strength from Atma Jnanam comes from Atma itself. Atma Jnanam, being Anatma, cannot be said to directly overcome samsara. But Atma Jnanam is what? The knowledge that I am Atma. And therefore that knowledge enables me to derive strength from Atma itself, from Brahman itself. And that is the strength which enables me to conquer death. Right? It's like we say that we have some medicine in a bottle, and we cannot say that medicine in the bottle cures me of some problem which I have. That medicine in the bottle has to be injected into my body to cure, right? We cannot say medicine cured the problem. We cannot say injection cured the problem. It's only the injection which became the tool for getting the medicine into my body which cures my problem. And therefore, Atma is the medicine. Atma Vidya, Atma Jnanam is the injection. Using the Atma Jnanam injection, the Atma medicine is injected into my body. And therefore, the power of the Atma becomes available to me. And with that power, only with that power, I can destroy samsara. And Shankara adds very categorically here, only the strength coming from Atma can overcome samsara. No other source can overcome samsara. Therefore, the strength from Atma alone can destroy samsara. Okay. Now we look at the next and the last quarter. Vidyaya vindate mritam. So, Vidyaya vindate amritam. This knowledge born from the Shastram can get me moksha, get me amritam. Now, look at the words. Earlier it said, Atmana vindate viryam. Right? So, why does it say, Vidyaya vindate amritam? Should it not say, Atmana vindate amritam? You get the idea. If you're looking at the last quarter, it said that this power to destroy samsara, it is coming from Atma. And now here he is saying that Vidyaya, by Atma Jnanam, Amritam Vindate, or immortality is conquered, or immortality is obtained. Mortality is conquered, which means immortality is obtained. But so in Vidyaya Vindate Amritam means by Atma Jnanam, one overcomes samsara. So there could be an apparent contradiction in these two quarters. And Shankara says here that really speaking, there is no contradiction, because the strength drawn from Atma Jnanam is nothing but the strength drawn from Atma only, which is why I gave the example of the injection and the medicine. The medicine in your body has been injected into your body through the injection, but through the needle, but that medicine is from the bottle only. So the Atma Jnanam which I am getting is actually giving me the strength which is available in Atma only. And therefore, that is a reason why in Shastram, the word Atma Vidya is very often taken as the same as Atma Jnanam. And so when we say Atma Vidya gives moksha, actually we are saying it is Atma itself which gives moksha, which means the knowledge that I am Atma, that itself gives moksha. And therefore, the one who is Atmani Sthitam, the one who is established in the Atma, that person is established in Atma Vidya. Remember this very important idea. If I am established in Atma Jnanam, which means what? That Jnanam is I am Brahman. In the content of every thought, I am, which is Brahman. That is called Atma Vidya. That Atma Vidya, when you are established which means when you remember it all the time, when you're aware of it all the time, then it is said that you are established in Atma. Okay, so that's, and if you remember, Shankara quotes Shruti, Nayam Atma Balahinena Labhya. Where did we hear that? Nayam na ayam Atma Balahinena Labhya. This Atma cannot be obtained from somebody who does not have strength. By somebody who does not have strength. We saw this earlier, where
Bhagavad Gita chapter 8.
nope. What was the last Upanishad we did?
Mundaka Upanishad.
Mundaka.
Was it there in that?
Yes, sorry, got confused.
You can't forget. In Upanishad class, you have to remember every Upanishad. Okay. So this is in Mundaka Upanishad, chapter 3. Nayam Atma Balahinena Labhya. The Atma cannot be obtained by someone who does not have strength. And remember, this strength is drawn from where? From the very Atma itself. So he says, this is what is meant here also, that unless you have the strength drawn from Atma, which means, how do you draw strength from Atma? By knowing that you are Atma. How do you know? By Atma Jnanam. Unless you have Atma Jnanam, there is no way of getting over samsara. So the understanding is that only when I know that I am that Brahman, which is there in every thought, then alone I am capable of overcoming samsara. When I constantly remember that in every experience, Brahman is there. So they are very simple in our Tattva terms. In every RC, the RM is there and the OC is there. So RC can be taken not only as Jiva, RC can be taken as every thought, which means every experience. And therefore, in every experience, content is what? RM plus OC. OC is Brahman. So in every experience, Brahman is definitely there. And further, you have to remember that I am that Brahman. When I remember that I am that Brahman in every experience, that alone is the moksha giving idea. That alone is establishment in Atma. Okay, with this, the mantra is over. Any questions? Very, very important mantra. In fact, as I said before, this mantra contains the very essence of all the Vedas, all the Upanishads. All Atma Jnanam necessary is contained in this very mantra. That if I can see that I am present in every experience all the time, then I am free forever. All right. So, since you guys are not doing Mani Mannam right now, Shankara introduces two other views. See, one of the reasons why we need Mananam is because when you do Shravanam, you are convinced whatever teacher says is fine and is great. But when somebody who has a different view comes and explains to you, then you get doubts. He has his own view. He comes and explains to you, then he gets his doubts. So one of the ways of doing Mananam is to take up the views of other darshanas and try to understand the arguments and argue against it. So that is a Mananam process, which you will find happens in Shankaracharya's commentary off and on, because Shankaracharya not only wants to make you understand the Upanishad, but he also wants to shake us up. Mental shaking, as it is called, whether you can really argue against somebody else's view. So he takes up, he introduces the views of two darshanas. One is called the Jnana Karma Samuchayavadi Matam. Its originator is somebody called Bhartru Prapancha. Prapancha here is the name, okay? So Bhartru Prapancha is the originator, this whole matam, this whole darshana, jnana karma samuchaya, means jnana and karma are together. Then both of them are necessary for getting moksha. That particular darshana is called Bhartri Prapancha Matam. Then the other one you already know, Nyaya, Nayaka, so Nyaya Vaisheshika. Nyaya ka Vaisheshika Matam, which is Rishi Kannada. So two matams are there, Jnana Karma Samuchayavadi and Nyaya Vaisheshika. These two matams are there. The originators are Bhartri Prapancha and Kannada. So first let us take the Jnana Karma Samuchayavadi matam, and we'll see, first we'll briefly see what are the tenets, what are the ideas of that matam, then we'll see how to refute them. So Bhartri Prapancha matam, it says that knowing, the word know, is what? It's a verb. And he says, since knowing is a verb, knowing the word is an action originating from a verb, what does verb indicate? Action. Therefore, knowing is an action. That is one of the primary ideas propagated by Bhartri Prapancha, who says knowing is an action. Remember, we don't take knowing as an action. We explained this several times. Okay. So, first one is that knowing is an action. And therefore, since an action, a kriya of knowing is there, there has to be a conscious entity involved in the process of knowing, right? And the matam says that the mind is jada, the mind is insentient, inert. And since knowing involves sentiency, the mind cannot be the knower. And therefore, knowing has to be done by Atma alone. What is the difference between this and our idea? What does Vedanta, what does Advaita say as compared to this particular idea that mind is insentient, therefore the knower can only be the Atma? What do we say?
We say that it is because of this consciousness that the mind knows.
Yeah, we say it is the reflected consciousness. The mind plus the inert mind, plus the OC, that is RM plus OC, creates a fictitious entity RC. The RC is the Pramata, the knower. Right? Here he is not saying that. He says the OC itself is the knower because RM is inert. It's a different argument. Okay. His third argument is that Atma cannot be seen. It is not pratyaksham, which means it is indriya agocharam, not graspable by the indriyas. And according to our, which we also accept, wherever something is not graspable by perception, it can be inferred, right, from various other things. For example, we take the fire on the mountain. You may not be able to see the fire on the mountain, so it is not available to your indriyas, but the smoke is there available to indriyas. The smoke is not the fire, but because of the smoke, which is the hetu, the cause, you can infer that there is a fire on the mountain. So the same argument here. Atma is not perceivable, but because of the action of knowing, you can infer that there is a conscious entity involved in the process, and therefore Atma is there. Okay. And Shankara gives an example. Another example. He says that I am looking out from my window and I see the leaves moving on a tree outside my window. What is the inference?
There is a breeze or some wind.
There is a breeze or wind which I cannot see. Right. Remember, I may sound very convincing, but you should not forget, this is all Purva Bakshi, right? The opponent's views, the Jnana Karma Samuchaya Matam. So he says, in the same way, this Atma, this Brahman, is known through the Bodha Kriya, the action of knowing. And this is what is meant in this particular mantra by the phrase Pratibodha Viditam Matam. Completely different from what we are saying, right? We said that Brahman is known, Brahman is the content of every thought. Here he says that Pratibodhitam, you have to understand that the Bodha Kriya you have to take, the action of knowing. Because of the action of knowing, you have to use inference to know that there is an Atma, a conscious entity, and that is why they say that this is the meaning of the word Pratibodha Viditam Matam, and not what you say, not what we say, right? And therefore, he comes with his theory, which is that Atma is inert. Atma is dravyam. It's a matter. It is inert, but it has got the power of knowing only when the act of knowing is in process, right? So the basic theory of this matam is that Atma is the dravyam. It is inert. It is only inert, but that is naturally inert, but becomes conscious, becomes sentient only when it is involved in the action of knowing something. And when you are knowing something, obviously knowing involves consciousness. And therefore he says Atma, which is naturally inert, becomes sentient, becomes conscious only when the action of knowing is taking place. Okay. This means what? If Atma is naturally inert, but it becomes conscious when the action of knowing something is in process, it means that this knowledge is a product of the action being done, right? The jnanam is a karyam. Okay, so that is the basic theory. Then Shankara says, okay, you are saying therefore that knowing is an action done by the Atma, is available to the Atma only, because Atma becomes sentient only when it begins to know. At other times it is not sentient. So therefore you are saying that this consciousness, it is subject to arrival and departure, right? That is why your theory is there, that when the knowing action starts, that time the Atma becomes conscious, and when the knowing action stops, then the Atma will become inert again. This is the theory of this particular matam. And Shankara says, therefore you are saying that Atma is inert. And in Sanskrit we call it dravyam, matter, inert, jada. Now the problem is, if all inert materials, and that is another thing which the matam says, that all inert materials are not capable of producing consciousness, only Atma is. So this is the problem. If every inert material is capable of producing consciousness, how is it that Atma alone has the capacity of knowing? Atma is again inert, part of that category called inert, right? And there is no pramanam, pratyaksham or anumanam, which can tell you that Atma is inert and can become conscious, right? Very important point. So if Atma is capable of becoming conscious, Shankara says, then the action of knowing. So Atma first becomes conscious because of the action of knowing, and then knows. So is Atma subject to change or not? Atma is subject to change. Because if you have to, first it is inert, now it becomes conscious. Then the knowledge, the knowing process is over, and again it becomes inert. Therefore, Atma becomes savikaraha, becomes subject to change. And he says anything subject to change is what Shadvikara, right? Tattva. Shadvikara means 6 changes, will be subject to change. And he adds, not only that, anything subject to change will be composed of parts. And anything which has parts and is subject to change is anitya, right? And if anything is anitya, then it has all sort of problems in the form of papam, punyam, impurities, etc. Right? So other things you can add, janma, marana, etc. So he says, in your theory, by saying that Atma occasionally becomes conscious and then becomes inert, what you have done is you have converted Atma into a samsari. Therefore, knowing Atma does not give you moksha. And therefore, the whole matam itself takes away the validity of the Shastra. And therefore, we cannot accept the matam. Anything, any idea, any questions? Because these are two ways of looking at these things. How do I make my understanding pakka, concrete? Can I argue against this kind of arguments? This is the first argument, that Atma is not really conscious all the time. It becomes conscious and it loses consciousness when action is over. And this is the argument that Shankara gave. Do you find it logical, or do you find any holes? Or can you come up with some other logic?
It's very logical, Acharya ji, because there has to be a satyatvam for the mithya entities. Otherwise, if there is no adhishthanam, then nothing can.
Yeah, so basically what is being, you must not forget the idea that whenever you take the universe as real, satyam, then samsara is satyam. And a satya samsara can never be avoided. Therefore, the only way that we can say that yes, study of Vedanta will give moksha is if the study is to point out the fact that the whole samsara is mithya. Therefore, only a mithya samsara can be negated. A satyam samsara cannot be negated. This is the two-line, summary of this whole story. And this we should not forget. Then there is another matam, which is Nyaya Vaisheshika, which we will take up in the next class. So we'll stop. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Vasishyate. Om Shanti
Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Tatsat. Om Namah Shivaya. Thank you.
Om Tat Sat.
Om Namah Shivaya. Thank you, Acharya.